Welcome back to the Growl with Hank, episode 11. I am your host, Hank Brewski. And before I say anything about the news, I need to say something about today. Today is Memorial Day, and Memorial Day is not about barbecues. It is not about mattress sales. It is not about the long weekend, although I hope you got some rest. Memorial Day is the day we set aside to remember the men and women who put on the uniform of the United States and did not come home. I am a veteran. I served, and I came home. A lot of people I knew did not. Memorial Day is different from Veterans Day. Veterans Day is for those of us who served and are still here. Memorial Day is for the ones who are not. The ones who gave, in Abraham Lincoln's words, the last full measure of devotion. So before we get into the deal that was announced and then unannounced, before we get into oil prices and Ebola and everything else, I want to ask you to do one thing. Sometime today, take 30 seconds. Just 30 seconds, and think about somebody who did not come home. Maybe you knew them. Maybe you did not. Maybe it is just a name on a wall in Washington. But take 30 seconds and remember that the freedom you have to listen to a bear complain about politics on a podcast was paid for, in full, by people who never got to grow old. That is the open. Now let us honor them the way they would want, by staying informed, staying free, and not taking any of it for granted. Let us get to the news. Time for the Bears Brew. 4 stories. Let us go. This one is a masterclass in how not to negotiate. Watch the timeline. Saturday afternoon, May 23rd, President Trump posts on Truth Social that a deal with Iran has been, quote, largely negotiated. He says a memorandum of understanding is nearly done. The Strait of Hormuz will reopen. He says the agreement is, quote, subject to finalization between the United States, the Islamic Republic of Iran, and various other countries. The market got excited. People thought, finally, after almost 3 months of war, maybe this thing ends. Then Sunday, May 24th, less than 24 hours later, Trump posts again. Different tune. He says, quote, I have instructed our negotiators not to rush into a deal. Time is on our side. There can be no mistakes. The naval blockade stays in full effect until a deal is signed. What happened in those 24 hours? Senior Republican lawmakers got to him. They publicly warned that rushing a deal with Iran could be a, quote, disastrous mistake. Israel expressed concerns. And Trump pumped the brakes. A senior administration official told NBC, quote, the Iran agreement will not be signed today, but there has been progress. So where does that leave us? We have a war that is almost 3 months old. We have a deal that is, depending on which day you ask, either nearly done or deliberately slowed down. We have a naval blockade that stays in place, and we have oil markets that whipsaw every time the president posts. Here is my honest take. I am glad he did not rush. Rushing a bad deal is worse than no deal. If senior lawmakers and our allies are saying slow down, then slowing down is probably smart. But here is the problem. You do not announce that a deal is, quote, largely negotiated on Saturday if you are going to slam the brakes on Sunday. Because when you do that, 2 things happen. 1. Your own credibility takes a hit. 2. And this is worse. Iran learns that your announcements do not mean anything. And when your adversary stops believing your words, negotiating gets a whole lot harder. Secretary of State Marco Rubio says there has been, quote, significant progress and hinted at, quote, possible good news. Maybe. I hope so. But after 11 weeks of this, I will believe the war is ending when I see ink on paper, not posts on a screen. We will keep watching. Story 2. Remember last week I told you about the Trump-Xi summit in Beijing? Well, the readouts are in, and they do not match. Trump came home and declared he made, quote, fantastic trade deals with Xi Jinping. He said China agreed to help open the Strait of Hormuz. He said China would buy 200 Boeing jets. He said China agreed Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon and pledged no military aid to Tehran. Big wins, if true. But here is the thing about international summits. Both countries put out their own official summary, called a readout. And when analysts compared the US readout to the Chinese readout this week, they found, quote, inconsistencies on agriculture, on tariffs, and on rare earth minerals. The US version and the Chinese version describe different agreements. Now, the experts say these differences are, quote, not significant. Minor inconsistencies. Diplomatic fine print. But I want you to understand why this happens. When two leaders meet and both want to look strong at home, they each describe the meeting in the most flattering way for their own audience. Trump tells Americans he won. Xi tells the Chinese he won. They cannot both be right. And the truth is usually somewhere in the gray middle that neither side wants to admit. Why does this matter to you? Because the Strait of Hormuz, the thing driving your gas prices, supposedly got a commitment from China. But if the Chinese readout does not mention that commitment the same way, then maybe that commitment is softer than we were told. And rare earth minerals? Those are the materials in your phone, your electric car, your military hardware. China controls most of the world's supply. If there was a real deal on rare earths, that is huge. If it was just talk, that is nothing. And right now, we genuinely do not know which it was. The lesson, as always, watch what gets signed, not what gets said. Story 3. And this is the one that is not getting enough attention in America. Ebola is back, and this time it is a strain we cannot vaccinate against. On May 17th, the World Health Organization declared a public health emergency of international concern over an Ebola outbreak in the Democratic Republic of the Congo and Uganda. This is the highest alarm level the WHO has. Here is what makes this one scary. It is the Bundibugyo strain. Most people, when they think of Ebola, think of the Zaire strain, the one from the big 2014 outbreak. We have a vaccine for that one now. But Bundibugyo? No approved vaccine, no specific treatment. We are fighting this one with the basics: isolation, contact tracing, and supportive care. The numbers as of this past week. In the DRC, hundreds of suspected cases, ranging by some reports up to 900 plus suspected, with dozens to over 100 confirmed. Somewhere between 130 and 216 deaths, depending on which count you use. It has spread across 3 provinces: Ituri, North Kivu, and South Kivu. In Uganda, 5 confirmed cases and 1 death, all linked to travel from the DRC. There have been confirmed cases in Kampala, which is a city of over 1.6 million people. Now, here is the important part, and I want to be a calm bear about this, not a panic bear. The WHO and the CDC both say the risk to Americans right now is low. Ebola does not spread through the air. It spreads through direct contact with bodily fluids of an infected person. It is not COVID. It does not float across a room. You have to be in close contact with someone who is sick or has died. But the reason the WHO is sounding the alarm is the combination of factors. This region has armed conflict. It has displaced people moving across borders. It has busy markets where 10,000 people cross between countries on market days. It has a strain with no vaccine. That combination is how a contained outbreak becomes a regional disaster. The CDC has issued a Level 3 travel notice for the DRC. That means reconsider non-essential travel. Why am I telling you this, if the US risk is low? 2 reasons. 1. Because 3 years ago we all learned the hard way what happens when we ignore an outbreak on the other side of the world until it shows up at our door. And 2. Because the United States CDC has been gutted this year. RFK Jr. fired thousands of workers. The CDC is currently being run by an acting director who is also running the NIH. When a global health emergency hits and your public health agency is running on a skeleton crew, that is a vulnerability. I am not saying panic, I am saying pay attention. And maybe ask your representatives whether gutting the CDC during a period of multiple global outbreaks was the smartest timing. Last story. A few quick hits that all connect to this holiday weekend. First, the travel. A record 45 million Americans traveled this Memorial Day weekend, most of them by car. That is despite gas being at $4.49 to $4.55 a gallon nationally, up more than 40% from a year ago thanks to the Iran war. Think about that. Americans are paying war prices at the pump and still hitting the road in record numbers to see family and honor the fallen. That is either stubborn or beautiful. I think it is beautiful. Second, there was another security scare at the White House. On Saturday, a suspect opened fire near a White House security checkpoint. The Secret Service shot and killed the suspect. A bystander was wounded. This is the second major security incident in about a month, after the Correspondents' Dinner shooting we covered in Episode 7. I am going to say again what I said then. We have a serious problem with political violence in this country, and it is not getting better. We will keep tracking it. Third, a quick one to watch. The Trump administration is reportedly setting up what is being called an, quote, anti-weaponization fund, around $1.7 billion for people who claim the legal system was misused against them. There are real questions about whether this is legal, and there is pushback even from some Republicans. I am not going to give you a hot take on something this new and this murky, but I am flagging it so you can watch it, because $1.7 billion of taxpayer money is not a small thing, and you deserve to know where it is going. And before I forget, oil is sitting around $97 to $106 a barrel, depending on the benchmark. It has actually come down a little on hopes of that Iran deal. So, if the deal that got announced Saturday actually gets signed, you could see relief at the pump by summer. If it falls apart, back up we go. Your gas prices are now officially tied to a Truth Social account. Welcome to 2026. Pause and effect time. And on this Memorial Day, I want to talk about something that connects the holiday to the headlines. Why is it so easy to start a war and so hard to end one? We are almost 3 months into the Iran war. We have had a ceasefire that has been extended, broken, renegotiated, and is still not finished. We had a deal announced Saturday and walked back Sunday. So let me explain the anatomy of why ending a war is so brutally hard. Because understanding this honors the people we remember today. Reason 1. Starting a war takes one decision. Ending it takes 1,000. To start a war, one leader gives one order. To end a war, you need both sides to agree on dozens of issues simultaneously. Who controls what territory? Who pays for the damage? Who gets prosecuted? What happens to prisoners? What happens to sanctions? In the Iran case, who controls the Strait of Hormuz? What happens to Iran's nuclear program? Every single one of those is a potential deal breaker, and both sides have to say yes to all of them at the same time. Reason 2. Nobody wants to look weak. This is human nature scaled up to nations. Once blood has been shed, once soldiers have died, no leader wants to be the one who, quote, gave up. The Iranian leadership cannot tell their people they surrendered to America. Trump cannot tell his base he caved to Iran. So both sides hold out for terms that let them claim victory. And while they posture, the war grinds on, and more people die. That is exactly what we saw this weekend. A deal was close, and then senior lawmakers said, do not look weak, and the deal slowed down. Reason 3. The sunk cost trap. The longer a war goes, the more people have died, and the more leaders feel they have to, quote, make it worth it. It is the most tragic logic in human affairs. We have already lost so much, so we cannot stop now, or it was all for nothing. That same thinking kept the US in Vietnam for years after leaders privately knew it was unwinnable. It kept us in Afghanistan for 20 years. The graveyard fills up, and the fuller it gets, the harder it becomes to admit it should never have started. Reason 4. There are always people who profit from war. I covered this a few weeks back. Oil companies making $30 million an hour. Defense contractors with full order books. There is always a constituency that does just fine while the war continues. They are not the ones doing the dying. They are the ones doing the billing. And they have lobbyists. And the soldiers do not. Now, here is why this matters on Memorial Day specifically. Every name on every war memorial in this country represents a decision. Somebody decided to start a war, or to continue one, or to escalate one. And that decision cost that person their life. The people we remember today did not choose the wars they died in. Politicians chose. The least we can do, the absolute least, is to make sure that when we send Americans to fight, we have thought hard about whether it is worth it, and we have a real plan to bring them home. And right now, with the Iran war, I am not sure we have either. We started this war on February 28th. It is almost June. We have a blockade, a fragile ceasefire, a deal that keeps getting announced and walked back, and no clear endgame. Meanwhile, American sailors and airmen are deployed in harm's way. 2 of our jets went down at an air show last week. An F-35 made an emergency landing near the strait. The bill is being paid, every single day, by the people in uniform. So on this Memorial Day, here is my ask. When you remember the fallen, do not just thank them. Honor them by demanding better from the people who decide when and where Americans fight. Demand a real war powers vote. Demand a clear strategy. Demand an endgame. Because the best way to honor the dead is to make sure we are careful about creating more of them. That is the deepest pause and effect I have ever done. And on this day, it is the one that matters most. Time for the growl. And this week I am growling about governing by announcement. Saturday, the president announced an Iran deal was largely done. Sunday, he announced it was not. In 24 hours, we went from peace is near to time is on our side. And I want to talk about what that does to a country. Because it is not just an Iran problem, it is a pattern, and it is exhausting. Here is the thing about governing by announcement. It treats words like actions. It treats a social media post like a signed treaty. It treats saying you did a thing as the same as actually doing the thing. And we have all gotten so used to it that we barely notice anymore. Project Freedom was announced, then paused. The Iran ceasefire was announced as a triumph, then it broke, then it got extended, then it got renegotiated. The China deal was announced as fantastic, then the readouts did not match. The Iran agreement was largely negotiated on Saturday and not so fast on Sunday. Announcement after announcement after announcement. And meanwhile, what actually changed? Gas is still 4.50. The war is still going. The blockade is still up. Americans are still deployed. Now let me be fair, because that is what this show does. This is not just one president. Governing by announcement has been creeping into American politics for years. Every administration does ribbon cuttings for projects that never get built. Every administration announces task forces that never produce anything. Every administration declares mission accomplished before the mission is actually accomplished. Remember that banner? Both parties have gotten addicted to the dopamine hit of the announcement, while the hard, boring work of actually governing gets neglected. But here is why it especially matters on Memorial Day. The men and women we remember today did not die for announcements. They died for actions. They did not give their lives so a politician could post a triumphant message and move on. They gave their lives in the gap between what was promised and what was delivered. Between the announcement of a quick, easy war and the reality of a long, hard one. When you govern by announcement, you create a country where nobody can plan. Businesses cannot plan because they do not know if the tariff is real or just announced. Families cannot plan their summer because they do not know if gas will be $4 or $7. Allies cannot plan because they do not know if the deal Trump announced will actually happen. Our adversaries learn that our announcements are noise. And our troops, the ones still serving, the ones we are honoring the fallen version of today, they get deployed based on strategies that change with the news cycle. I want a country that does what it says and says what it does. Where an announcement means something because it is followed by action. Where a deal is a deal. Where peace, when it is announced, is actually peace and not a Saturday post that gets walked back on Sunday. The fallen deserve a government of action, not a government of announcements, and so do the living. That is my growl. On Memorial Day, of all days. That is episode 11 of The Growl with Hank. Quick recap. Trump announced an Iran deal was largely negotiated on Saturday, then walked it back on Sunday after senior Republicans warned against rushing. The China trade deal readouts from the US and China do not match on agriculture, tariffs, and rare earths. The WHO declared a public health emergency over an Ebola outbreak in the Congo and Uganda, a strain with no vaccine, though the US risk remains low. 45 million Americans traveled this weekend despite 4.50 gas. And there was another shooting near the White House, the second major security incident in a month. But more than any of that, today is Memorial Day, so I am going to close differently than usual. If you are listening to this today, you are free. You are free to agree with me. You are free to think I am full of it and turn this off. You are free to vote, to speak, to worship, to travel, to build a business, to raise your kids the way you see fit. That freedom is not free, it was bought. By people who are not here to spend the holiday with their families because they spent everything they had so that you could spend yours. So take your 30 seconds today. Remember someone. And then go live a life worthy of what they gave. That is how you say thank you to someone who cannot hear it anymore. You live well, you stay informed, you stay free, and you do not waste the gift. Subscribe wherever you listen. YouTube, Spotify, Rumble, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music. But not today. Today, go be with people you love. The news will still be here Tuesday. So will I. I am Hank Brewski. This is The Growl. Stay sharp, stay free, and to the fallen, we remember you. I will see you next Tuesday.